Hi, welcome to Exceptional Endeavors, a mini podcast brought to you by Exceptional Needs Today, an award-winning special needs magazine designed to educate and support families, caregivers, self-advocates, educators, and professionals. My name is KD Tobik, and I am the founder of Exceptional Needs Today. We have designed this podcast to introduce you to people who motivate and inspire. Today, we have a special guest, Raun K. Kaufman, an advocate I've known professionally for many years. Let me read a snippet from Raun's impressive bio. Raun is an international lecturer and graduate of Brown University with a degree in biomedical ethics. He is the author of the book Autism Breakthrough and the co-creator of the Autism Crisis Turnaround protocol known as ACT, which pioneered the concept of the Neuro-Crash. The former CEO of an international autism training nonprofit, Raun has spent more than 25 years developing an innovative, heart-led autism approaches built around the true understanding of the autistic brain, nervous system, and psyche. As a child, Raun was diagnosed with so-called severe non-speaking autism, and it was recommended he be institutionalized. His parents worked with him in a new way they developed, enabling him to blossom and grow and prove his childhood doctors wrong. A best-selling book and award-winning television movie were made about his journey. Welcome to Exceptional Endeavors, Raun.
Well, thank you for having me. Wow, it's quite an introduction.
I understand you have a rather remarkable story to tell. Could you please share it with us?
Sure. Well, that's the story you were alluding to. And it was, we get all kinds of messages that we hear about our loved ones on the spectrum, especially when the diagnosis first happens. We get told all these things of this is now what's not possible for your loved one, what they're not going to be able to do. And my parents were given such a diagnosis. They were given such a prognosis. They were told that, I had so-called severe autism. I would never learn to speak. I would never communicate. I would never make friends. I would never prefer people over objects, right? And then all the different things. I would never go to a regular school or fall in love or get married or live on my own or all these kind of things. And they really turned their backs on all of these dire predictions. And they really, it's pretty amazing. They really worked with me in a new way. This is in the 70s when this was happening. So this was right. I consider this kind of the dark ages of autism. And they saw what was available. First they took me around, to specialists, and they saw what was available, and it just looked barbaric to them. And they didn't know what they were going to do yet, but they were like, it's not going to be this. And they also then became kind of students of my world. They literally would follow me around, take pictures of me. What is he like? What is he not like? What does he gravitate toward? What does he gravitate away from? Right. And so they became literal students of my world, seeing how I worked and then tried to join me in that world and connect with me on my own terms. And they developed a whole process around this. They worked with me for over 3 years. And I, as you say, sort of grew and blossomed and was able to connect with people in new ways. And ultimately really did go on to do all of the things that my parents were assured that I wouldn't, everything from, I'm grateful every day for my awesome
yes,
wife.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I've just had a really good situation. I feel like I've been able to have opportunities that it could have gone really differently. And it's not to say that means, it was somehow bad or worse the way I was, but more like I would just say that I've been very fortunate to be able to help people in the way that I have, get married to my wife, live the life that I've lived. I've done different classes and stuff in almost every continent. And so I just feel like it's kind of a statement of let's not decide in advance what our loved ones are not capable of, right? Absolutely. Let's just sort of give them every chance. And then at least wherever they get to, even if they still have different difficulties with things, at least it won't be us that's holding them back.
Right. Yeah. That's terrific. Now, we were talking earlier and you said you're going to be giving away something exciting today. Would you like to share what that is?
Yes. So me and my colleague, Kate C. Wild, have been working extensively on this particular protocol that you mentioned. It's called the ACT protocol, which stands for Autism Crisis Turnaround. We teach courses on it and stuff. And it's specifically helpful for families or professionals who love or work with a person on the spectrum of any age, 2 years old, 32 years old, has a lot of meltdowns, or has a lot of stress and anxiety, has a lot of what some people might call outbursts or extreme or explosive behavior. Maybe they've even started puberty and they've had some difficulties around that. Maybe they're having behavior issues in school or with siblings. So all these kinds of things that a lot of families tend to feel really at their wits' end with and kind of trapped with. And then there's, and they get a lot of what I think is unintentional misinformation. So in short, what we're giving away is, Kate and I teach this course. It's called the ACT Live Rescue Course. And it's a live Zoom course. It happens over the weekend. In this case, it's March 25th and 26th. So it's on Saturday and Sunday. It actually comes with a bunch of other things, like you get immediate access to a go at your own pace pre-course that gives you some things to do right away and sets you up for the course. Then it's followed by 4 weeks of after course implementation support. So there's a lot of things that go with it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Normally, if someone were just paying for it, it would be $495 for an individual or $595 for a couple. So we're giving away that course for that. So it's
wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it too. So you'll be picking that person through your special process, and then they'll get to do that. And I think you may want to just alert people about when they have to do that.
Yes. What we're going to do is make this opportunity available to all of our subscribers. And we're inviting new subscribers to join before, I think the deadline we say was February 28th, midnight. Then March 1st, we will do our magic and do our picks, and we'll let that person know that what they've won. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. Kate and I are excited about it too.
Wonderful thing to give away.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you. Now, what brought you and your colleague, Kate Seawild, to create the ACT protocol?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Kate and I, first of all, we've been working together for decades and decades.
Right.
A lot of experience. And she's been in the field for over 30 years. I've been in the field for over 25.
Right. Yes.
If you count my childhood, it's a lot longer than 25, but professionally. and it's interesting. What we were really aware of was, we've worked with all different kinds of kids, adults, families, schools, and we were seeing this common thread, which is that there was a deep misunderstanding of both people on the spectrum and also why they're having these kinds of reactions that they're having, like a meltdown or an explosive reaction or high anxiety. Why are they having that? And either we saw two things happen a lot. One is either the child or the adult gets blamed, like, hey, they need to learn the appropriate behavior. They need to learn that this is not okay, and they get that kind of thing, which then often leads to kind of punitive, consequence-based behavior modification approaches, which we've seen
Right.
usually make it worse and also just add trauma on top of trauma to this person on the spectrum, right?
Right.
The other misnomer or the sort of misunderstanding that we see happen, and this is by people who don't blame the child or adult, but they say, hey, this is just part of autism. This is what to have someone on the spectrum, you're going to have a lot of meltdowns. This comes with the territory. This is part of autism. And actually it's amazing because that's not what we've seen. It's not actually part of autism. It's something that a lot of people on the spectrum go through for sure, but it's a product of someone on the spectrum being subjected to environments and circumstances that make it impossible for them to function. And then you get these explosions. But actually, if you have someone on the spectrum, whether it's considered, quote, severe or mild, meltdowns are not an inherent part of that. Actually, if you give them the right environment and circumstance, they'll still be wonderfully autistic, but they will not be constantly having these meltdowns and struggles because they're not constantly subjecting it to something that's overloading their brain, overwhelming their nervous system, et cetera. In fact, actually, that's what we address. Is why we created the course that you're giving away, which is we wanted to show people, okay, so first of all, if it's not autism, and it's not the child or the adult, what in the world is it?
Right.
And we have this term we call imposed situations, which is basically these environments and circumstances that have to do, and there's different kinds. There's actually 7 different ones. I won't go over them now, but they have to do with, some have to do with the sensory environment they're in. Some have to do with how much they have a very powerful need for control, people on the spectrum. And then when we are constantly ripping that control away from them, not on purpose, but in different ways,
Right.
sit here, do this, eat with a fork, that builds up over the course of a day. So there's that issue. And there's also even issues that have to do with the emotional frequency of the people around them. So a lot of times adults, neurotypical adults who are helping people on the spectrum, they might not be aware of all the ways that their emotional state is actually affecting the person on the spectrum who's picking up on that. I always find this amazing because people have, you hear this term thrown around, mind blindness. People on the spectrum that have mind blindness, they can't connect with what other people think and feel. They have no theory of mind. I always found this amazing because in my experience, people on the spectrum are more highly attuned to the emotional states of the people around them than most neurotypical people.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So we take all of these, take the 7 things, and we go through. Okay, what's causing this for your loved one, and then what do you actually do? It's like we usually recommend people take 2 to 3 weeks to implement what they've learned. It's not
that's great because so many courses are like, one day, and it's like, a few hours, and then you leave like, what was it I was doing, or not knowing what that response is going to be, from the child, and they're like, wait, I thought I knew what he said.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good point,
because they come back and be like, like, wait, what? Right.
Yeah. A lot of, actually, I get that feedback from a lot of people, what you just said. And the reason why we have that like after course support is because, some people get worried, like, okay, do I have to now do all the things you're recommending forever? And we're like, actually, no. If you, the child or adult is usually, if they're having, especially if they're having a lot of meltdowns, they're in a bit of a spiral where they're dysregulated and they're having a lot of trouble getting regulated. And then we keep piling things on top of them by accident, not on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
That's keeping that cycle going. So what we see is if you take a couple of weeks and you pull back on all these imposed situations and they can get regulated again, then they can maintain that even with some bumps on the road.
Right.
But first they need that 2 to 3 week period to get regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, people get into cycles, and they just can't get out.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give people to reduce meltdowns and neuro-crashes right away?
Yes. Oh, great question. And before I answer it, let me just say this.
Okay.
You just mentioned something very important to deal, if someone wants to deal with meltdowns or neuro-crashes, let me just define that word because it's at the center of the course that some of you, one person will get for free and other people may decide to take. That is, a neuro-crash is basically this, okay? It's when the environment and circumstances, the imposed situations, overwhelm the person's brain so that their coping mechanisms shut down. So when you have a meltdown on the outside or some explosion on the outside, the neuro-crash is what's happening on the inside. So it's not a chosen behavior. It's not like, I think I'll throw something at the window right now.
Exactly.
It's like, I liken it in some ways to like sneezing and coughing. It's a physiological response.
Right.
And so if someone wants to start reducing neuro-crashes and the meltdowns that come from that, there's a couple things that they want to be aware of and want to do. So number one is they really want to be aware that neuro-crashes are a product of global buildup. People think, oh, I just have to find the trigger. And oftentimes there is an immediate trigger, sometimes, but that's not really the point of it. What really is going on is there's a global buildup of sensory overload, violations of their need for control, emotionally agitated people, and the other 4 of the 7 things that also happen, right? So there's a bunch of things that happen that build up over the course of a day and even over the course of a week. And so what happens is when it builds up to that critical point, then you're going to get a neuro-crash. But that's a good news because what it means is there might be something you can't stop. Maybe you live someplace where fire engines go by, and when your loved one hears the sirens, they have a meltdown.
Right.
So you can't stop the sirens. What are you supposed to do? But the good news is, if you can reduce the imposed situations globally, you don't have to get them to zero. But for instance, have less situations, like give your loved one more control in situations where it's safe to do so. Of their environment. Like, do they have to eat at the table? Do they have to eat with the fork? Do they have to do it? Can they not wear their favorite shirt more than once? Right? The different things that they could do.
Right.
That piece, being aware of the not overloading them from a sensory perspective.
That makes sense.
Some people even take their kids out of school for a few days just to decompress. Right. So if you can get that global level down, then even, let's say now you can't stop the fire engine, so the fire engine goes by, they still might not like the sound.
Right.
But we haven't burned through all their internal resources now. So they hear the sound for a moment, they don't really like it, but they're able to use their coping mechanisms with it, because we haven't burned through all the coping mechanisms. Right. So that's number one. And then the second thought, I would just say, second and final thought, is that all neurocrashes are precipitated by what we call SOS, which stands for signals of stress. And most people don't see this. They don't read this language. And it's the first thing in the first 2-hour class, we focus on this. And this is about basically noting things like, are there changes in their breathing? Are they, like, they're holding their breath, they're breathing faster? Are they opening and closing their hands? Are they saying no a lot? Are they stimming, but the stimming's now become much more intense? Is there a lot of tenseness in their facial muscles? If you see these kind of things, these things will often happen a good hour before the neurocrash even happens. Not just 5 minutes before, but like an hour and a half before. So if you see that, you can take some advanced precautions that's going to head the neurocrash off before it ever happens. You can take them to a quiet room. You can take them home if you're on an outing. If you're making demands on them, you can immediately stop. So there's different things like that.
To know those signals. That's wonderful. That's all excellent information. I know our subscribers are really going to want to know more about that. How can people connect with you, Raun, to learn more?
They can, well, the simplest thing they can do is just go to autismcrisisturnaround.com. That's our website. There's always, lots of information there. There's a free video on there. You can do different things. You can register for the course. But of course, people are going to contact you first and try and get that free.
Yes, I would say.
autismcrisisturnaround.com, simplest way.
Yep. And you also write for Exceptional Needs Today. We've had you.
I do. I love writing for Exceptional Needs Today.
Thank you. And Kate C. Weld, who's your co-founder of ACT, is a columnist for us, which is wonderful. We really enjoy her advice. So, well, please join us at Exceptional Needs Today. And you can get a free subscription by visiting our website at exceptionalneedstoday.com. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter too. Terrific. Raun, would you like to leave us with a positive thought for the day? You're always so energetic and positive. I've known you for years.
You know what I would say? Number one thing, right? If you are able, and any of you listening, right? If you're able to let go, meaning if you want something from your child, you want a certain kind of progress, or you want something from your husband or your wife or significant other, you want something from one of your child's teachers. It's okay to want something from all these people, but if you can let go of needing them, needing them to give you that in order for you to feel okay, kind of let go of that, then it enhances your relationship with them. You'll feel way more relaxed. My mom has this great expression she uses. She says, some people will say it's hard to let go, it hurts. And actually, what my mom always says is, it's not the letting go that hurts, it's the holding on. Very, very true. Good advice. Definitely. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on our very first show. And is there anything else you'd like to add? No, I'm just so grateful. I'm glad to be on this inaugural show, and glad to talk to all of you out there. Okay, well, great. Thank you. Well, bye for now. Yeah.